go right ahead because it's here and it's now. Just move every bone to a cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Toward a Quality of Life. We're here in the month of March, the year 2005. And tonight we're going to continue with our series of driving home issues and points about animal suffering, animal cruelty, help for animals, and being aware that they're all around us and need a place and right to live a decent life just as any other creature on this earth. And to help me this evening, I have with me a guest named Mr. Wim deKok, originally from the Netherlands, who is a consultant who travels worldwide working on animal welfare issues and has had many years' experience in that. Mr. deKok, thank you very much for being here.
Glad to be here.
And I see you're a fairly young person, but you've had how many years' experience?
Yeah, more than I would care for, actually, but it's been more than 25 years I've been professional in animal welfare work.
Yeah, I see. And what made you start being involved in it at all?
It's kind of interesting. I grew up in a small farm in the Netherlands, just like 50 miles from Rotterdam, and I grew up on the farm. And when I was a teenager, at some point in my life, we were having animals at the farm, of course, pigs, cows, and also cats. And at some point in my life, I thought, why is it that we treat the cats that we have so different from the pigs that we have? And so I said, either I should stop eating the pigs and treat them the same way as I do the cat, or eat the cat and treat them the same way as I treat the pigs. I discovered some inequality in animals, so I thought, and so my final decision was, lucky for the cat, that I decided that I should give all animals an equal share, and that I should do my best for both the cats and also for the pigs.
Yeah, but what's the big deal? I mean, kill a pig, what's the big deal?
Well, the big deal, the killing is one thing, but it's also the life that the animal leads before it is killed. And that, particularly in the factory farming business nowadays, is a big problem. Pigs live for months on end in very bad conditions. So it's the suffering during its life. Then the final phase, of course, is the killing. And yeah, you can have different views about it, but all I would say is the best thing people could do is visit the slaughterhouse and then make up your mind whether you still want to eat meat or not. I mean, that's a choice most people make, but I think it's good not to hide yourself from it, but see what's going on.
In other words, if we were closer to the source of our food and saw how it was produced, so to speak, we might have a whole different stomach for it.
We might, of course.
Or we might not.
Yeah, some people would say, well, this is the way things go, and I still keep on eating meat. But it's sort of hypocritical to say, well, I don't want to see what happens to the pig, but I still like to eat them. I mean, that's sort of hypocritical. So they say that if abattoirs had glass walls, then very few people would still eat meat.
And what is an abattoir?
Oh, sorry, an abattoir is a slaughterhouse.
Oh, okay. I have heard that word before, but I didn't know it was a slaughterhouse.
I guess more common in Europe, but it's the same thing.
So how did you keep the pigs on your farm? Didn't they have a fairly decent life, like in a barn?
No, initially they did. But as more and more farms were using more automated systems, it became more and more difficult to stay a small farmer. So as we've seen in the US, the same thing has happened in Europe, is that either you become a big farmer or you have to stop your business. So it became impossible. At that time, we had maybe 10 pigs. I mean, it became impossible to keep that. You would have at least maybe 2,000, 3,000, which means a lot of mechanization, automated feeding, and also means less attention for the individual animal. Now, the modern farmer who works in factory farms is more somebody who makes sure that all the conveyor belts work, rather than somebody who really has a deep appreciation for the life of its animals.
In other words, in certain instances, when farms were smaller and more rural, there may have been a whole different relationship between the farmer and the animals.
Very much so. This is what farmers tell me. I've visited many farms, and actually my own family went out of business because we couldn't keep up with the modern industrial farming, and it's less fun to work. I mean, if you get in the, for example, where eggs are produced in battery cages, it's a big, huge shed with maybe 50,000 animals, very dusty, very noisy. It's very unpleasant work. It's hazardous work often, and the people.
It's what work?
Hazardous. It's very
hazardous.
Very difficult to work there. Dangerous, and it's no fun to work there because if you have 50,000 chickens, of course you cannot pay attention to an individual animal.
I would say, yeah, it's like having all the pebbles on the ocean shore. It was just, there's no organicity to it. There's no aliveness to it. No. And this reminds me of research too, because when you need to get a result, and research is mechanized, and even though it may not be on a volume, though it often is, you can't really consider the living creature. You've got to consider the result. You've got to consider, what you're looking at, and the creature's kind of in the way. It's the thing that you're using for a different purpose altogether.
Well, and understandably so in a way, because there's been an interesting study at Tufts where they did some questionnaires for people who work with laboratory animals, and they found that those people, particularly after they've worked for a number of years in laboratories, they get desensitized. They care less about the animals, and it's almost not that you can blame them for it, because the reason why they do this is because this is the only way they can carry out their profession. The same with farmers. If I talk to a farmer who keeps chickens in battery cages, they'll say, well, those veal crates are really terrible. And when you talk to a veal farmer, they say, well, these chickens in battery cages are really terrible. They, in order to survive in their business or to survive emotionally, and this is the same for animal researchers, they have to sort of tune out, because they know once I get emotional, I won't be able to do my job. And of course, we need objective science and so on, and we don't want emotions to interfere with that. So it's to some extent. I personally, I do not blame the animal researcher really for what he or she is doing. It's more what I blame them for is the defense of what they're doing in doing the unnecessary things. Most animal research is carried out for safety testing for all these great products that we need so much in the supermarket, and that's where most of the testing is done. And the biomedical research, the health research, is only a small part of it. So what I expect from any animal researchers is that they try to do as little as possible. And what I would want, of course, is that they would stop altogether. But what I would like to hear from the animal research community is more an attitude of, well, okay, we'll try to do as little as possible. Some, in their view, some it might be necessary, but I need approval of that. And what I see now is a defense of it all the time. I was at the State House earlier this week. There was a protest. This was against the use of, against the particular use of farm animals. And you find there is the Veal Farmers Association defending what they are doing. Rather than saying, okay, what we're doing, we like to have it different, what do you suggest? But they defend the bad business that they're in.
It's true, and they're in lockdown. They go deeper and deeper into defense.
Yeah.
Kind of like what we might be doing politically in a way too. You bury yourself deeper against your purported enemy or whatever is the problem, instead of saying, well, let's open up this box and see what is the problem here and what can be done about it, and get a more light on the subject, if you will. But when you say that people get desensitized, and once someone visited me to talk about some investigation he was doing, I think from National Sciences, on how people feel who work around laboratory animals, and he was telling me that the depression rate is phenomenal, and the burnout rate is phenomenal, for having to deny and defend against what goes against the grain and doesn't really jibe with human emotion.
That's true.
Yes. But you know, it also reminds me, not only with animals, when you work in a nursing home, for example, or an institution for children that have problems, you also, the way the system is set up, you have to go through so many persons, and it moves so fast, and the medical or whatever fields are brought to bear on it are so fractionated into specialties that one whole person doesn't do a lot of things. So the whole thing is just an assembly line kind of. And you see people living and dying in three-quarter time, to quote Jimmy Buffett, the title of one of his albums, I think. And you just go along with that, and people come and go, and you just get used to it, and you never notice the difference.
Yeah. That happens to people, and what we of course try to do when we talk about human welfare is that we try to set regulations and standards so that even if people get desensitized, they still have to meet a certain standard in their work, so they still can care for the people. That's what you hope for, and this is of course what's sorely missing in
Good point.
When you talk
that
about
there's
animals.
This legal liability hanging over your head all the time that you have to be careful of to do right, even if your heart's not morally bound to do so. All right, now back to there you are in rural Netherlands. Oh, we got a little violin playing here. A little boy on the farm. Did you have brothers and sisters?
I got one brother. Yeah.
One brother. How does he feel about animals and eating meat?
Initially, he thought it was kind of strange. I was, in a small town of maybe 1,500 people.
Oh,
so,
that's small. Yeah.
So I was the village vegetarian at
You
the
were.
time. And then coming from a farm, that's a bit odd, of course.
Yeah.
But and I remember my uncle saying, well, it's just he's now a teenager and he'll get over it. And I guess that's one of the problems. I never got over it.
So they were kind of tolerant of it.
They were well, initially, of course. There was some genuine worry, of course. My mother tried to sneak meat into my meals.
So because she thought you weren't getting your protein?
Right. Have to stay healthy, if that's how you grow up.
How do you get your protein?
From eating healthy, It's very easy to eat vegetarian, and it's even the American Association of Dietitians says that the vegetarian diet is a very healthy diet.
And you must supplement it with vitamin B complex, must you know?
There's plant-based vitamin.
What based?
Plant-based, yes.
Vitamin B. That is sufficient to match what meat provides.
If you do a healthy, it depends on what kind of diet. If you do, there's two types. There's vegetarian, and those are people that don't eat meat but might still use dairy products or cheese and things like that.
Yeah.
And there's the vegans who are very strict in
nothing that comes from an animal.
And they are advised to have vitamin B supplements.
I see. And they can plant-based vitamin B supplements.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Really?
They exist. That's
really?
no problem at all. Yeah.
So this idea that there's a certain parts of the B complex that are only obtainable from meat, red meat, is not true?
That's not true at all. There's many vegans in the United States, and it's of course you have to pay attention to your diet. But if that's what your choice is, at the moment there's so many alternatives available that it's really not.
So evolutionarily, our body is chemically set up to get a meat-based protein. Is that right? Would that be fair to say, or not?
No. Well, as with many things, there's argument about it. Whether it is, and I think for people who care about animals, the main thing to ask is, can I do it or can I not do it? And often these things are also a matter of habit. If you've eaten meat all your life, it's very difficult to change that. But in the end, it's a matter of choice. Can a human being live without eating animals? And the answer clearly is yes.
Yes.
Now, you can say, well, thousands of years we ate meat. Well, that's very interesting. Thousands of years we did many other things that we wouldn't do now. It's possible to change it.
We did many things like conduct wars, which we still do, which we would be well advised to think about changing. We did barbaric acts, which we still do.
Right.
But yet, we have some evolutionary change, we would have to say.
Yeah.
Some of us are better off, majority-wise speaking, than we might have been in the past.
We have the option. I think that is
and this could be evolutionarily where the human psyche meets the human body, so to speak, and change comes because of consciousness, which probably change always came because of consciousness.
Yes, yes.
Being a...
And some societies have, like if you talk about meat, have done that very early. One of my first, when I was a young man, I traveled to India, and to my surprise, even at the railway stations, of which there are many in India, you would find even a smaller station would have two restaurants, one vegetarian and one non-vegetarian. So there are other societies that are far more advanced when it comes to choosing a non-animal-based diet.
And India used to impress me so when I was younger spiritually, that the plane of existence psychologically, metaphysically was so higher order to give a sacred place to animals, or at best to not harm them, even the ones considered by us to be very lowly, like rats in certain cases. And the planes of existence of respect for life. I guess mostly coming somewhat from the Hindu and a lot from the Buddhist. From the Hindu. I used to be so in love with that. I did travel to India eventually myself. Unfortunately, India is changing.
They're catching up
and
in the wrong way.
They're going highly Western as everything goes with technology. Yes. So, and do you think you feel differently on a non-meat diet? Do you think you become sort of a more spiritual person, or can you still be the same dirty old bastard, so to speak?
You can be either way. They come in shapes and sizes,
so
I
it
guess.
doesn't necessarily cure the...
It's not a license, license to kill, being a vegetarian. No, it's you can. Some people do. It's sometimes it's nice. It's a nice idea that you don't contribute. If you read about factory farming, the pollution it causes of the environment, it's nice to know that at least you're not contributing to that. And some people do really spiritual things, and some vegetarians are just plain,
health conscious.
Health conscious.
Do it for health reasons.
Yeah.
I'll say one more thing too. I remember once seeing a chicken tied by its neck on a farm in a country, just looking like this. I said, "What's wrong with that chicken?" And it had been pulled from the flock to be killed at sunset, and it seemed to be looking, it really did, because it knew, and it seemed to be looking at the world that it would never see again. That really, so when you say look at, if you can get to the source, and I have had so many people tell me, not talking about animals, they're just talking, and they bring up, when they were children, seeing a pig slaughtered, seeing something slaughtered, just, was a watershed in their, it really got them. A lot of this.
I know. I even it was a fun story. But when I as a teenager, when I had just turned vegetarian, on my way to school on my Dutch bike, there was like these lorries that pick up the bones from the butcher and from cows that have been slaughtered, and one of the bones had fallen off the lorry, and so I picked up that bone and took it to school, and I hang it at the entrance of the school. And years later, I met a girl she was in the same bus, and she told me that from that day on she had become vegetarian. It was just a little anecdote. So it is possible. Of course, those are people that already are at the verge of making that choice, and they only need a little push, and that's when it happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have so many lights to light up in our consciousness. We're so dim-witted about many things. I mean, all of us have many more. We talk about seeing the light. I saw the light. I saw the light. Now, I hope some people out there watching are young people. I know some of you liked the show I did on pit bulls, young people like that. But I hope you're watching now, and since you, Wim, can make a living, I take it, doing animal welfare, could you speak a little to what kind of careers? I hate to call this a career because I don't do this as a career at all. I do this as a sickening necessity, or a necessity about things that are sickening. But how could people start thinking to become animal welfare advocates as career choice or a life path choice?
Well, there are nowadays. It is a lot easier than what it used to be because there are more humane societies, animal protection groups that work in a more professional way than there used to be. Where it all starts, of course, is as with many of these kind of jobs, is by volunteering. I was volunteer the first 7 years of my career. I did work because I was motivated. Once you're motivated enough and once you're good enough, it might be possible. You are in contact with one of the organizations. It could be the MSPCA, Humane Society United States, Farm Sanctuary. There are many nowadays. Actually, one of the things I do now is maintaining a network of animal protection organizations, and there's some like 15,000 of them across the world. So there's many organizations. Many of them are just volunteers, but there are also many professionals. Having a study as a biologist or maybe as a veterinarian often helps. It's not required.
It's often so hard to get into veterinarian school, I hear, So many people would love to be vets that cannot, get in.
Yeah, and the sad thing is also once they have become vets, they often are not longer interested in working for a humane society, but they go on to do their own practice because that's of course still there's more money in that than in the humane society business, so to say.
And being a veterinarian hardly means that you don't do research on animals.
Oh yes.
To which I'm entirely opposed.
Right.
But that community has its big share of researchers.
That's where veterinarians often end up. This is what when I go to veterinary school in the Netherlands, I sometimes give lectures there, and what I see there again is that even during the studies, the students who come in while they want to work with animals, in the process they get desensitized. I mean, a very important place where veterinarians often work, for example, is as meat inspector in a slaughterhouse. I mean, this is also where veterinarians are used. So you want to help puppies and you end up as a sausage inspector. I mean, that happens. Anyway, going back, how do you make a career in animal protection? It's volunteering. When you're very good at it, the organizations that have professionals, you will see that there might be openings and you might be able to help. It's not a career where you can make a lot of money, but it's a career that if you're lucky will get some pay so you can survive.
Mm-hmm. And people I've spoken with who spend really all their waking hours on these matters are dedicated. They're like devotees, really.
Yeah, they're very dedicated, and that's really what's necessary because there is no money. Usually, the organizations that do have staff, they also have a membership. So it's the individual donors that then pay for the income of the organization, and from that they have to pay the salaries, and that's just very difficult. There are many volunteer organizations who have a small membership or no membership, people who work on their own, and that's at the moment what the animals depend on, which is in a way is sad. Because if you look at the number of people involved in animal protection, it is, for example, the number is far more than the people, let's say, who are member of the National Rifle Association. Yet, if you look at the political influence that animal protection has as opposed to the NRA, you see that animal protection as an issue. I mean, where did we see it in the political rallies? Hardly.
Never.
Mr. Kucinich was, I think, the only
one.
one. He was a vegan himself. And
That's right. He was a vegan, he was also espousing animal rights causes.
Right, but
I didn't know that.
He did, but we see where he ended up on the list.
And we know how he was ridiculed for being such a kindly, thoughtful gentleman and thinking we should have a Department of Peace instead of a Department of War.
Yeah.
What an idea.
Yeah, imagination is not a requirement for
I was
politicians.
looking at Senator Lugar the other day, who of course is involved with defense 10,000%, and I remember a psychologist telling me years ago how he went to him and tried to talk about new ideas for peaceful ways to, and he told me that Senator Lugar looked at him like, you've got to be kidding. Get with it, pal.
Yeah.
We're in the real world. So, this is how we think. We're in the real world. We got to go kill some, kick some butt and kill some people and eat beef and be a cowboy, and etc. Yeah. So there's not big money to be made being an animal, but your thought there, that statement that the numbers that care about animals, both actively working and if they see it, can't stand what they see
Right.
with the problems are far greater
Yes.
than the number that just want to effectively abuse, or they don't call it abuse, but use animals.
Yes.
This is interesting.
Yes.
So they don't have the money, is what you're saying, because money would be the reason of the clout.
Probably. We don't have the money. We would have the votes, but it's not enough, I guess. The issue is not thought of important enough to get everybody to vote for, let's say, an animal-friendly candidate. First of all, there's no candidate that really chooses animal issues as they're high on their priorities. So then it becomes almost impossible to vote for a person like that.
We don't even have human issues high on our priority.
Well, that too,
think
that
about
too,
that.
that
No,
too,
really,
that
we're
too,
gone far
yeah.
away from that. We're not even talking much about that.
There is an interesting parallel, though, if you look at the European different countries. There you do see that animal...
You mean that sissy called Europe, that place we think is such a sissy socialist place that doesn't want to get the most capital out of labor as possible and the biggest increment to the GDP?
Yes, what is the question is, do you work to live or do you live to work?
You live to work, and you live to produce, and you live to make General Electric stock go up.
That's right, and I think this is where the Europeans tend to think different. They work so they can have a good life, and when they have a good life, they stop working. Yeah, because it's about the pursuit of happiness. I think is something that's been a bit forgotten here in the U.S. And if you look at Europe, you see more people pursuing happiness, and they realize it doesn't come from just working and from just having lots of money. There are other things important. And animal issues are an more important issue on the agenda. I mean, the European Union, but also on the
Even the European Union.
European Union, for example, has outlawed the use of the leghold trap, a trap that's still allowed here in the United States. Not in Massachusetts, by the way, but it is allowed. So on some points we are more enlightened, but there's many. The use of battery cages for laying hens is going to be prohibited in the European Union.
What's a battery cage?
A battery cage is a cage the size of, let's say, a newspaper, the Boston Globe, in which about 5 or 6 hens are kept all their life, 16 to 18 months. And what they do there is every day they produce an egg. It rolls onto the conveyor belt, it goes away, the animal gets food on the conveyor belt and stays there all its life. Animals, chickens, they're cramped together. They get aggressive, obviously, because they are so cramped together. They lose their feather. They stand on wired floors. Their feet hurt, and this is where the eggs come from. This is a system that scientists have decided is very unfriendly to animals, and therefore the legislation in Europe has been adjusted. So these systems will be prohibited.
And they'll be getting more space to live.
They'll be getting more space. They'll have access to a laying nest, because the laying of an egg is a big production for a chicken. It's the thing why it is on this earth, to produce an egg, because egg means offspring normally. So laying an egg is a big ritual, and if the animal is not able to fulfill that ritual, you get a lot of unrest, you get fighting and so on.
Displacement behavior, what they call adjunctive behavior, where they take their feathers off, pick at their skin, pick at each other's beaks, aggression, yes, so many topics here. We're going very fast here. Now, 2 things that you said. One, you said you were head of animalworld.net. Is it
World Animal Net.
Why don't you show this? I know you wanted to show this.
This is one of
and if we can get a close-up of that, possibly.
Yeah, one of the things, so it's www.worldanimalnet, because this directory is also online. This is a book we produce, and this lists 15,000 organizations all over the world. And you start off...
Let's see, I can see it in the camera, it's a little shiny, there we go.
Okay, so this is the big book. It's 15,000 organizations, 500 pages, and if you open it up, you'll see the different countries listed, Ascension Island, Australia, Armenia, all the countries are listed here. And this is in a way encouraging, knowing that there are so many people throughout the world who work for the welfare of animals. Again, it's also disappointing that they haven't been as successful as they should have been. But it is one of the things, and this is one of the things I'm doing. I'm the director of the organization.
Well, we won't be able to see that probably.
I'm the director of the organization, so it's www.worldanimal.net. And what we do is we network with the organizations to make sure they get the proper information about the work for animals.
Okay, all right. And then the other thing that you mentioned that in fact, maybe we can even zoom in on this table if possible to see the things that we want to illustrate today. The other thing that you mentioned was the steel jaw leg hold trap, which is an infamous, horrible trap. Tell us a little about that. Maybe we can zero in even on all these things on the table if possible.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes.
In the United States, still about 4 million animals are caught in the wild each year for the production of fur. This might be beavers, squirrels, muskrat, raccoons. 4 million a year.
For fur?
For fur.
Around the world?
Just for fur. No, just for the United States.
Just for the United States?
Although the United States is the biggest producer of
animals in the wild are caught
animals
for
in
fur.
the wild. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
With all the other things they have to contend with?
Well, yes. And so there's still fur production going on. It's far less than what it used to be. It used to be 18 million. This is like 2 decades ago. Now it's still 4 million, but it's still one of the most cruel devices that animals can get confronted with. Banned in the European Union, banned in, I think, 82 other countries around the world, but not, I should say banned in Massachusetts, but not banned in the rest, in most of the other states. And I've set a trap, which in itself is a very tricky thing to do.
All right, hold on. Can we show the table just to some of the articles we have here, and then he's going to show the trap. Yes, okay.
So this is the leghold trap the way it's been said. This one has a special
spring. Okay, can we really see that well? I don't think so.
Shall I maybe try to...
Yeah, put it on the black. That would be good.
That will be better, huh?
Okay. Why is that chain coming off of it?
The chain is
we really see
there because...
Not too well.
The chain is... well, when it springs, we'll be able to see it. The chain is there because the chain will be either tied to a tree or to a stump in the ground.
I see.
So when the animal is caught in the trap, it will not be able to run away. Otherwise, it will run away with the trap on its paw.
I see.
There's a special spring here because once the animal is in the trap, this spring will push away the animal from the trap, because it's known that animals tend to bite off, to chew off their own leg in order to escape. So this spring will, once the trap is shut, this spring will keep the animal away from its leg, so it cannot chew off its own leg. This trap has been set, which in itself is a risky business. What happens is this trap will be covered with leaves and things like that, so it won't be visible to the animal when it walks in the woods. Usually during the night, by the way. Most animals that are caught in traps are nocturnal, so it will be night, there will be leaves over this trap.
And the animal will be covered over.
Yeah, and the animal will step on this little thing, and I'll show how that works. It goes like this. And so this is how the animal gets... and it cannot get away anymore. And here the animal, it might be in the trap for maybe even for days, depending on when the trapper comes along.
Could bleed to death.
Bleed to death, often freeze to death, because most of the animals are trapped in wintertime. It usually freezes to death. A trap might be set underwater in the case of beavers, and the animals will drown. Terrible research, has shown that it might take up to 17 minutes for a beaver to drown underwater. So it's just a tremendously cruel device. Again, a device used for the production of fur. And product that there is no need for us to have. It's just a luxury item that some people who still are not informed or who don't care about animals still wear. But in general, I mean, it's a totally unnecessary device. There's no need for fur production. We can easily do without it, and still, because I guess there's still some money in it, some trappers and some fur buyers still are involved in this.
Mm-hmm. So 4 million lovely animals get caught in this trap in the United States alone every year for people to have fur coats.
To have fur coats. Mm-hmm. And there's still some celebrities like Jennifer Lopez who still wears wears fur. And it could be wild fur, or it could be fur from the farms, because this is something that a few people know, but there's also about 2 million animals that are farmed on the fur farm in the United States, 40 million worldwide. So the majority of fur nowadays comes from farmed animals. And farmed animals would be mink and foxes. Those are the main animals that are farmed.
And that's very bad too, I take?
Well, again, it's these animals are not domesticated. They're not like cows and pigs that if you give them the proper environment, they can thrive. With mink and foxes, they are wild animals, so basically there's no environment that you can give them that they can feel well in, except living in the wild. But both mink and foxes are kept in small wired cages where they go completely crazy. Again, they grow about 6 months and then they are killed on the farm. They're wild animals, so they cannot be transported to a slaughterhouse. They are killed on the farm, and the common method to use them is either by gassing or by neck breaking or by electrocution. I have one of these neck breakers here. This is used for mink.
Do you think we could maybe zoom in on device? This other, what shall we call these? There is, the Middle Ages had contraptions like this for torturing people.
It looks like it.
Yeah.
And this is used for mink.
Can we zoom in and see what is that there?
And this is what's called the neck breaker, because if you have
neck breaker.
If you have to kill many minks, you finally get tired from breaking that neck. So the fur farmer has this special tool where he puts the head of the mink in this device and then easily pushes like this, and that will break the neck of the mink. That's what's used on mink farms, in addition to gassing. Foxes are often electrocuted, and the way this works is you need a car battery for this. The car battery gets clipped onto, with these clips. What happens then is that the fox is lifted up by its tail and neck.
Can we zoom in on this instrument here?
So this part of the apparatus is put into the anus of the fox. Then this part is held in front of the mouth of the fox. The fox will bite. The moment the fox bites, the farmer pushes the button and the fox gets electrocuted. It's a totally unsuitable device for euthanasia, but still it's allowed to be used on fox farms. So this is what goes before the fur coat that one can see in the stores.
So when people used to throw blood on fur coats, they did it because they really felt for, I'm not justifying it, but this really bothered them, that animals were clamped in these leg hold.
Yes, that is the most well known, and this has been, for many years, animals caught in the wild was the main concern for animal welfare people, and they didn't know that much about fur farming. But now the majority of animals come from fur farms, and you can debate what's worse, because on fur farms the animals have a miserable life all their life. Wild animals, at least they have a decent life before they end up in a trap, and the end is very cruel. But at least it had a decent life. The farmed fur, the life of the animal is terrible.
Except they also suffer from habitat encroachment, so they might be having a very paranoid or worried life, if they're living along highways and trying to, that's another thing. I understand what you're saying. They could also have a miserable life even in the wild, unfortunately, because we don't know enough. To provide land for animals and let them be. You had this.
One of the first things I did internationally was the anti-fur campaign, which was to inform consumers not to buy fur, because that's with many of the products and all these practices. We can accuse the people who actually are mistreating the animals, but we should not forget that often they mistreat the animals because we give them an incentive. We buy their products, we pay for it. And this is definitely the case with fur. The trapper goes out, the fur farmer does his work because there are people who are buying the product. So when we started the fur campaign, at the time it was common to show all the bloody pictures with animals in traps, which of course is the hard truth, but often makes people turn away. They don't want to hear it, they don't want to listen to it. So we designed a more soft approach to give the same message, but in a softer way. Now this is actually the Japanese version of the poster that we designed, and the poster shows a baby red fox, and what it says in the English version of the poster, it says, "Does your mother have a fur coat? His mother lost hers." And this was a nice, a nice way of presenting the message, but obviously a very true one. And we found that presenting the message in this way is much more effective, because it doesn't turn people off. It makes people realize this animal is still alive. You have a choice. If you decide not to buy the fur coat, this animal will live. And I think that is very important. What is interesting is this. The way this campaign came about is that it was based on a document that was produced. We obtained. Somebody sent to us that was produced by the Canadian fur industry, and the Canadian fur industry had this big media strategy, and they had analyzed that. They said one of the biggest threats to the fur trade was animals like Bambi and Donald Duck. Because Donald Duck and Bambi show that animals have a family, that they have feelings, that they are sensitive, so that's a bad thing, they say. So that was a big, so that we used that same theory to make our own media strategy. And so we showed a nice animal, we called it Victor, little Victor, and we showed that this animal has a family and a mother, has a mother, and therefore we should care for the animal.
I get your drift. That's a good idea. Very good idea.
The last bit.
Wait, before you even say that, this trap you say is banned in Massachusetts, but it's not banned in most other states?
In most states. It's also banned in Rhode Island, but in most states it's not banned. No.
I see. Because I know I still get messages to write about that. And in Europe it's banned totally?
Yes,
so
it is.
Europe is a little bit more advanced on animal rights issues, is it, or?
It depends. It depends. Some of it, definitely legislation-wise, there is much more advancement. There's national governments that have put legislation for animal welfare forward, and so yes, I think there's a better recognition. There are political parties who just have animals as their main issue.
And is Britain really the head of the pack?
Britain, I would say Britain, Sweden, and Switzerland are the three ones that really are the most advanced in legislation for animals. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And
maybe one thing in which Europe is not advanced yet is that some countries in Europe still allow the sale of cat and dog fur, and this is why this piece of fur is here. This is something that I obtained at a German fur fair, and there are still, at that time, there were still coats available made of simply house cats. This is a house cat, or was a house cat, and they're still for sale in some European countries. Again, this is a nice example. This is the import of these types of fur is banned in the United States. So the United States has set an example that cat and dog fur is not allowed to be imported, which is a very good thing. So in some ways, maybe we are advanced.
Yeah, well, we love our cats and dogs, don't we?
Right.
And for the most part, I mean, we go a little bit overboard, don't we? I mean, we could strike a balance.
Yes, I think like I said at the beginning, if we would give our pigs and cows the same good treatment as we give to our cats and dogs, to some of our cats and dogs. That would be a lot better. And I think this is where it comes down to the basic principle. I always say that especially any family that has a pet knows it has an ambassador for the animals in its home. And when anybody who has a dog can see that the dog has joy, the dog can be sad, can be aggressive, can be nice. And basically this is what we see in other animals too, except we don't want to recognize that. So if you know pigs really well, you see that they can express joy, that they have a very complex social life, that they build a nest before they give birth, that they have a great, the mother really cares for the young animals. And these are things that are all not possible in modern factory farming.
alligator mothers really care for their young.
Well, there you go.
You know, I mean, it's a beautiful thing. They're one
Right.
of the best mothers on the planet.
Yes,
But
yes.
that's how it goes.
It doesn't
Yeah.
mean they like
Yeah.
people very much.
No. Or
because
other species.
and maybe because they care so much about their offspring, that's why they don't like people. Because people are usually the threat to those animals.
Okay, and what else do you have here on?
Well, one of the things I've done in the past is I have done investigations into bear farms in Asia. Bears are farmed. Some of the viewers might have heard about this. Are farmed for their bile. Bear bile from the gallbladder is sometimes used in Eastern medicine. And farmers in China and also in Japan would keep bears and simply either kill the bear and take its gallbladder out, or more horrendous even, they would put a tube into the animal so the gall would drip out slowly, and that's how they would use it. Now this is a can of I obtained at one of those parks in Japan, where there was. Bears were on display for the tourist, but in the same tourist shop you could buy the cans that would show that would have the bear meat in it. So it's kind of interesting. We like bears, but seeing them displayed in a zoo-like environment and then buying them later in a souvenir shop is an interesting experience.
So can we zoom in on that, or is that possible? Or
Yeah, this is the front page. Yeah. So this was from Hokkaido Island, actually the northern island of Japan. And the same with you could also buy a can of seal meat. You know, so all I say is different countries, different habits. Seals are not always an endangered species, but few of us like to see a seal killed or be killed.
why don't we
or
show
eaten.
this? Are you still zoomed in? No, you're not. Okay, all right. Okay, so yeah. Well, when you bring up the idea that seals are not an endangered species,
Not everywhere.
yeah.
There are 17 species of seals, and some of them are highly endangered, and some of them are plenty. And that still doesn't mean that we should just kill them as they do in Canada.
No, because I notice with animal welfare advocates, sometimes there are people or scientists who are not necessarily advocates. They really get hooked onto this idea that if a species is going to possibly extinguish, then that's super important to keep it for the biodiversity, or I don't know what reason. But not as important if animals are just being killed on the road every day, slaughtered or in traps, if they're plentiful, if they're not going to be extinguished. I find that curious.
Yes, there's an interesting contradiction between often what is called, let's say, nature protection and animal protection. And sometimes the people who want to protect nature are sometimes prepared to sacrifice the individual animal, for example, by giving hunting rights and making money out of this, in order to preserve nature, as they call it. And then they don't want to look at the individual animal. And I think this is what animal protection is all about, is that you take the time to observe the individual animal and not say, well, are there plenty of them? And if yes, then we can kill them any way we want. But just try to empathize. Anybody who has a pet will, like I said, will know that the animal has feelings, and put yourself in that position. And an individual seal, and I just came back from Holland after working in a sanctuary for seals for the last 6 months. We rescue seals that are in trouble, and we take them into this is like a hospital, a seal hospital, and we give them great care, and after 3 months they go back to sea again. Now it's really interesting because we spend $10,000 to rescue one seal. At the same time, in Canada, they soon will start. They club the seals over the head. At the moment, this year only even 300,000 are going to be killed, just wasted. So there again, there's a strange contradiction.
There is.
Some people
Very, very strange. Like when the dolphins land ashore, people are so concerned. Everybody goes down to get those dolphins back out to sea, or a whale, and people are so upset. And yet, look at the garbage we're putting in the ocean, and radioactivity, and
or we go to see a dolphin show where we know that animals have a terrible life.
Or even whale watching.
Yeah.
You know, leave them alone. They're out in the. It's very curious. But you never know what will pull at the strings of your heart. You never know. But there are some. It reminds me of a similar curiosity of being a Christian and going to war and killing people, you know, and causing maiming and destruction, or hating people,
yes,
you know, or doing unchristian things, but getting to church on Sunday.
Yep.
Have to throw that in. Yeah. Well, the problems facing animals, we've only come across dealt with a few today briefly. There's the clubbing of seals, there's the sonar in the ocean, there's the pollution in the ocean that the fish and mammals are trying to live with, there's the quality of the air, there's the melting of the ice caps for the polar bears, there's the matter that the animals are living under conditions of having nowhere to go, being short on land and territory. And really, no one country is quite more enlightened than another on many, you know.
No, and maybe almost the same could be said for people, because, you know, we all make choices, and I think when you sum up all these terrible things that happen to animals, you could get very depressed and say,
yes,
where do I start?
I'm always in denial.
And I think it's one of the things she says, it's important to know that there are many organizations that are working constructively to improve the conditions for animals. You can make your own individual choices, and also think, at least I definitely in my case, you know, you cannot solve all the problems for the animals in one go. Be happy with all the small steps that you can take, and then the same with the welfare of people, who are also important, of course. This is, of course, another thing that I often get thrown at me. Why don't you work for people? And I say, well, unfortunately, there are many people that work for the welfare of other people. I make my contribution as much as I can, but I happen to be a specialist in this field. And, you know, somebody who works with cancer patients, you don't accuse them and say, well, why don't you work with HIV patients? I mean, everybody has their own role to play.
Or if you work in producing meaningless videos on some topic, you don't say, why don't you work in cancer research?
Right.
You know, maybe, yeah. And so all of this, I do see that you're telling me to wrap. I see that. Thank you. And so we'll just say this. It's all true. You have to be happy with small steps, unless you're the animal enduring the I have to throw that in. You know, unless you're the one on the cross, or with the electrodes in your brain, or the trap on your paw, then you know, help me. So, thank you very much, Mr. deKok, for coming. And I hope some people out there, young people, are getting interested in working for and with animals. And thank you very much for tuning in. And please help animals any way you can, if just by mentioning when you see things that aren't right, or, you know, giving them love and spreading the word. Thank you very much. We'll be here again with you soon. Good evening.